so much. Really, really nice to be here. One of the things that I miss the most about pandemic life is travel. Our family had, I think, 14 trips canceled this year, and this is my sort of vicarious traveling life now, is having people from all over the world on my little screen. And it makes me so happy and fills me up. So I'm grateful that you're here. You may have seen in the chat that you were invited to indicate where you're calling in from. And if you're not sure how to do that on Zoom, what you do is there's 3 little dots on the top right corner of your rectangle. And it says, if you click on there, it says rename. And you can type in whatever nickname, pronouns, location, anything that you want me to know about what I should be calling you during this time together. Following on our theme of the Facilitation Lounge, if I had you in my living room, which I would prefer, in addition to sharing some good food and drinks together, I would certainly want to make sure to be calling you by the right name. So please make sure that whatever you want to be known as is what is typed in your name section. And also if you can put where you're calling from, that will make me feel like I have been places today, which would be quite delightful. My background is that I have a strategic planning and collaborative facilitation company in Canada. I live about an hour west of Toronto, and I work in the space largely around nimble facilitation. I wrote a book last year by that name that talks about being adaptable, being responsive when things don't go according to plan, which in my experience is most of the time. My work is primarily in health and social services with large nonprofit groups and local governments and health organizations, universities. And I teach about maybe, I don't know, a quarter of my time is training and teaching in those things that I consult in normally. And I've been doing all of that for, I think, 23 years this year. Have been grateful to be involved with IAF for about the last 7 or 8. And like Celeste, am on the board. But unlike Celeste, I am new to that role. So it's been fun for me to be learning how to do this, and great to connect with all of you. My hope for today is that I can create some spaces for conversations about things that will allow us to kind of some mind space to reflect on our practice. And where this is coming from for me is that I like all of us, I think, have been more heavily emphasizing digital work, and therefore trying to figure out as a facilitator what that actually means or looks like and why it matters. And I'm doing 2 things I'm noticing, and is that one is that I'm saying things like, please don't get stuck on the platform. It's not about whether we do it digitally or in person as much as it is about what makes for a good meeting. You know, we all have a professional and intuitive participant kind of sense of meetings that are terrible and meetings that go well. And I'm encouraging people to bring whatever facilitation skill they have to whatever platform they're using. And I don't care if it is online or not. I don't care if it's Zoom or not. Just run a good meeting. So that's kind of one part. But the other part I'm noticing is that the platform actually does matter a lot. So how I, as a facilitator, do some of the things that I do has to change because of the platform. So yes, any good meeting, I would say, needs to be purposeful, but how I keep us on track with that purpose varies. Or any good meeting needs to have some energy and pace to it, and how I create that energy and pace is different in this space. So in that vein, I was thinking and have been thinking recently about this issue of safety in a space and creating positive spaces. And that's what I'd really like to talk about today, using examples from your experience and mine, and largely some things that haven't worked and that are really recent. So I'm right in the middle of figuring some of this stuff out, and I figured that was a good lounge kind of conversation. So please don't hear this as I've got this all figured out. I've written the book on it. It's all, you know, nice little neat bow done. It's not that at all. It's, this is what I'm noticing from spending my life on Zoom. What are you noticing? And so it's that kind of day. I hope that all of us can take a few tips back to our practice from all of this. So one thing I'm noticing on Zoom in particular, or in digital life, is that it's helpful for people to connect in smaller groups quickly. We know, I hope, that Zoom does have breakout room capacity, and I'm noticing that people feel like they can engage better when they have a chance to get into those breakout rooms quickly. So I want to make sure to do that. So I'm not sure which of the folks that welcomed me here has the hosting role right now on Zoom that can create these breakout rooms for us. But I would love to have breakout rooms for the next, call it 5 minutes, with 3 or 4 people per room. And I will type the question or the instructions in the chat, but you may or may not know that the chat from the main room in Zoom doesn't carry over to your breakout rooms. So if you want to take those instructions with you, you're going to have to cut and paste this. And also you may or may not have the same challenge that I do, and that is that I can write and talk at the same time, no problem. I cannot type and talk at the same time. I have also learned that recently. So let me type the instructions in the chat, and then we'll send you off into those rooms once they're made for us. So this is the question I have for you is, what is one way you've been helped to feel welcome and safe in an online session? So you might have created that for people, or you might be a participant in that, but I'm curious what someone has done as a facilitator or leader to make you feel welcome, included, heard, safe, however you want to describe that, but just make you feel like this is a good place to be. I'd love for you to take 5.
Rebecca, you froze.
I think it is only Rebecca who is frozen.
Yeah, I think Rebecca had a problem with her connection. Let's see if she comes back. In the meantime, someone was asking if we took the question, and the question was about, is there anything that happened that made us feel welcomed in our sessions, either as a facilitator or a participant? So I would suggest, Rena, that you can organize us in breakout rooms, and we can start this conversation. And once Rebecca shows up, then I think I think it's fair, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I think perhaps Rebecca was using it as a methodology so that we become very safe and comfortable the moment she goes out, so we can talk what we want to talk. Maybe that is one way we can make people safe and they can talk what they want to.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And that would make a difference in themselves. So some just brought a wig, others different glasses, one even brought a mustache and or a scarf and something like that. And when they were joining, they would show up like that. And it was a huge laugh, because everybody was laughing at each other, saying, wow, papa, you're wearing that, and you are wearing that, ha, 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 ha. And it was about 10 minutes laughing. And many people were really laughing to that, you know, kind of, and it was amazing. So that's it. Yeah, and it looks like we are really having a problem with Rebecca, or this situation, which is funny to have, because she doesn't even answer WhatsApp or mobile or email. Probably there was a shutdown, electrical, I don't know what's happening here. So I would suggest if anyone else would like to move forward, and then I'll see with Rena how we can catch up to Rena. Yeah, Gerard, yes, please. If you can try to catch up with her, please. Yeah. So anyone else would like to give some thoughts, and even you, Bogdan, because you're one reference, even people now refer to you from our talks and from our summer festival as well. So would you like to share with us your practice?
Okay, thank you. What other things that I saw that makes people feel comfortable is to take them outside of their comfort zone slowly. So do not do something which is really crazy, even if it's funny, but take it slowly outside their comfort zone. So you don't start with the dance because maybe people don't feel comfortable with that yet. And you could start with a question, and the question can elicit an emotion that you want to elicit in them. So if you want them to smile, you can ask them, can you share in the chat or share between each other or share with all of us something that make you smile last week? Or it can be a funny question that everybody can share. Like what would you ask a fortune teller if you go there?
Wow.
And it's funny because we will not answer the same. I might ask what are the numbers for the lottery, but somebody will ask, I don't know, where are my keys?
Okay, nice. Well, I would suggest that we get this challenge that you are doing now, and what would we ask to start to what you said? Now I forgot. I'm sorry. A fortune teller, right? So Rena, if you can put us, for example, in a groups of 4 or 5, and we immediately share among ourselves, this small group, what we would ask to the fortune teller.
Sure.
Could you do this? Could you
Sure.
do this for us?
Yeah,
please. Thank you.
Exactly.
And we are just improvising now, but I think we can take advantage of it. Yeah.
Now, and
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad you were all so kind. Oh my goodness. Okay, I've never used Zoom on my phone before, so I'll be struggling a little bit, but are we ready to start back up again, or are we waiting for people to come back?
Yeah, I think we should, you can move forward, because we already have this conversation about the question that you asked us, what happened to make us feel comfortable and safe. Okay. So if you want to move from there, please.
Okay, that's great. Let's do that. Sorry, everybody. Thank you so much. My entire telephone, internet, and electricity all just died. We think maybe a truck cut the line or something in my house, and I'm in my kind neighbor's house, and we'll continue from here, modeling nimble facilitation and not wanting to waste your time. I'm sorry about that. I want to talk about 3 things. So if you think about the term PDF, which we're used to from our documents, that's going to be our little shorthand for today around 3 words when it comes to psychological safety and facilitation. One of them is promises. What can we actually promise around that kind of safety in a room, and what can't we? Second one is dynamics. And then the F stands for functionality. What is it about the functions of the platform we use that will help us or hinder us? And I guess what I really want to start focusing on is to say, this is all very context dependent. And so I'm going to give us some principles that I think will, I hope that you can kind of morph into your own setting. So the first one is this. When we talk about the P of promises, I think it's really important to address the issue of safety in a space, but probably not every time and not with every group. So I don't want to make this too important, but I also don't want to minimize it. And I want to work from a couple of different scenarios with you today. One is if you were working in an ongoing team, maybe that you're a part of, maybe that you're not. You might be the invited facilitator in. But also, what would it look like if you were working with a public engagement kind of setting where people don't know each other? Because I think the dynamics around safety are quite different when people know each other or when they don't, but they are no less important. They're important in both contexts. And so I'd like you to play with those two scenarios in your head, an existing team and a group that doesn't know each other. And not only they don't know each other, they may not ever need to become a team or get to know each other. And I think as a facilitator, the level of safety that we can create in a very short time might be different than how we can either create it or undermine it in a long time, over time, when a team is working together. So when I think about the promise of safety in a space, I can, as a facilitator, if I'm an outside person coming in temporarily to either of those scenarios, what I can do is a bit limited in terms of creating safety. And so my first thing is not to be oblivious to it. My second thing is, what are the limits of what you can actually promise? Because I'm coming in new, I'm coming in maybe for a very short time. And it would be like me saying to you today, don't worry, you can say anything here. It's a safe space. Say whatever you want. You will never hear those words out of my mouth because I don't believe them. I don't believe that someone coming in new briefly can make a space safe for people. But I also don't think that we should be completely unaware of a lack of safety or potential for it. So what I want to do now is pause for a second and talk about my understanding of the term psychological safety and where that comes from. Most of my work in this area draws on Amy Edmondson's work. So her last name is spelled Edmondson. I'm not going to try and type and talk on my phone today, so I'll let someone else do that if you want. But Amy Edmondson also draws on lots of other people's work about what it takes to build psychological safety in teams, particularly in organizations. And her work in the Fearless organization is something that I really am impressed by. And she talks about two characteristics of psychologically safe teams. They have a really high level of social intelligence, and sort of they keep an eye out for each other and they have each other's back, like that kind of not oblivious to one another quality. And then the other one has to do with equal airtime, which means that basically over time, people contribute roughly equally to decisions, to conversations. And one of the things that I love about those two elements of psychological safety is that we do have control over that as facilitators. We can insist on respectful behavior in a space, and we can create processes where people do have roughly equal opportunity to contribute. And we do that lots of ways. But what I would say in a room, rather than saying this is a safe space, I can promise that I will contribute to the safety in those two specific ways. Does that make sense? So that's where I want to pause for a second and say, that's the understanding of psychological safety that I'm working with. We could talk about it for much, much longer, but this idea that people feel protected in a sense that they're not going to be laughed at or excluded or criticized, and that they will have an opportunity to express themselves. And so what I'd love to hear is, what's one concrete way, and maybe you can type this in the chat. Let me use this actually as a chance to show you something in the chat that's kind of fun in case you haven't done this exercise before. I'm going to give you a question. You can type it in the chat, but don't hit enter yet. Okay, so don't hit enter, just type your answer. So my question is this: what is one way in facilitation that we help make sure people feel that they had equal airtime to other people? Okay, that's my question. What's one technique or strategy that you use in a space to give people equal airtime? So you type your answer in the chat, but don't hit enter until I say so. All right, I hope you've had a chance to type something. So I'm going to say on your mark, get set, go, and then we're going to see a chatter fall or a chat storm in the chat. So on your mark, get set, go. Let me see those answers. Nice. I'm going to pause and be the facilitation trainer for a second and say, one thing I like about that activity is that it's one way I use to create a little bit of safety in the room. And that is to say, quiet people don't want to be talked at. Well, none of us want to be talked at all the time. So if there's a way in your spaces that you can create silence, even for 10 or 15 seconds, to give people time to think about their answers, rather than having to constantly multitask, our brains are really taxed by all the multitasking that we're doing online right now. We are listening, we are typing, we are talking, we are reading other people's answers, keeping track of the chat, being in the space. If we can create even moments where people can just think of their own answer and they don't have to read everybody else's right then, that helps. Anyway, have a look at some of those other great answers that are there. So as facilitators, we can make promises about what we can and can't do in terms of creating a safe space for people. But I think it would actually be damaging for me to walk into a space and say, to presume that I have some control over huge power dynamics. So let me tell you a story about that. And I'll keep drawing on this example through the rest of our time. I'm doing a project right now on hate prevention and mitigation in a local government. And if I were to say to them, you know, I'll create a safe space for you when these are folks who are experiencing violence, experiencing racism, experiencing discrimination, my sort of light, you know, it's a safe place here, feels actually quite almost offensive to suggest that I have any power over that. But what I can say to them is, in this space, I'm going to do my best to give everybody an equal amount of time to contribute. Do you hear the different promise there? Mm-hmm. I'd love to pause for a second, and I'd love to have 3 of you comment on what's already going on in your head right now about this piece about promises before we move on to the second part, which is dynamics. Any questions or oral comments? If so, I'd love to have you put your hand. I don't know if I can see the raised hands, but others who have a full screen in front of them perhaps can. But if we could have maybe 3 or 4 people comment, I'd love to hear what this makes you think of. I'm going to have to ask for help of someone else moderating the conversation because I can't see faces or dynamics very well right now.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see if someone would like to share the thoughts that are popping in. Yeah, I can help you out, Rebecca.
Thanks. Celeste, your face is the only one I can see, so it's nice that it's a familiar one.
Oh my God, that's a huge responsibility.
Oh yeah, it's pressure.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I just wanted to give people a chance to absorb really what I was just saying. So my question was a general one to say, do you have any questions yourselves or observations about times where, of what a facilitator can or can't promise about creating safe spaces? What's our role in that? Maybe we'll keep going and get into more specifics and it'll be easier to engage. That's fine, no problem. The next piece I wanted to talk about actually was really related to the D of PDF, and that is dynamics in the room. And what I'm noticing about Zoom in particular, and I'll use Zoom as my example, but it doesn't need to be Zoom. It could be other collaborative platforms like MS Teams or WebEx or whatever people are using. But what I notice is that there are some issues around dynamics that are specific to this kind of engagement that we need to pay attention to. Some of them are really minor, maybe, but they make a big difference. So I want to talk about one of those to start with, and it's punctuality. Different cultures have different expectations around meetings starting and ending on time, right? And one of the things that I miss about life under a pandemic is bumping into people, right? If we're not out of our houses very much, we have to schedule conversations rather than just running into people in coffee shops or on the street or something. And in Zoom meetings, we click a button to let people into the room and we click a button to let people out of the room. That changes something. And so I'm curious what you're noticing. Can you type in the chat, what's one great thing that you like about that red button that's kind of an end meeting button, right? The start meeting, admit people into the room, end the meeting. What's one great thing about that? Just put in chat what you like about it. this is where all my efficient people come out, right? They're like, I love this because, so what do you love about the fact that you can start a meeting? Yeah, you can promise to stop right on time, right? Anybody have any comments? What do you like that function of the fact that online meetings we can stick to the key points, right? We have a very efficient sort of tight edges, right, to meetings online. Culturally, for some of you, you might love that, right? Or even temperamentally, you might love that as a facilitator. Like I'm a punctual person. So if you love starting a meeting right on time and ending a meeting right on time, you love this feature, right? If you're the kind of person that punctuality is not important to you particularly, you love kind of a casual, gradual start and end to things, we need to think of other ways to really build that dynamic into our meeting. And so my point is that you can leverage the features of a platform to do what you want to do. So if it's important to you that things start and end right on time, then you let people in from the waiting room right on time and you hit end meeting right on time. And you don't have any of that drifting in and out. Same thing with the breakout rooms, right? They start right on time, they end right on time. You don't have to wait for people to chit chat on their way back and grab a coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever. But if you like that chit chat and you kind of miss it, we need to find other ways to do it. So I'm curious, has anyone found ways of creating in an online space kind of that gathering time at the beginning of a meeting or that departure time at the end of a meeting? What are you using for some techniques to make sessions, kind of the punctuality piece, a little more casual? Anything you've been trying at all? You can speak out loud if you want or put it in the chat, whatever you find easier. So I see Andrew saying music, and some of you may have joined us at the very beginning and heard the music that I had playing. If you're not sure how that happened, you can share your computer sound with people and just play music as they come in. Absolutely.
I think I can elaborate a little bit on Jan Lely's comments. He says that he doesn't like pushing buttons to allow people in or out. I like the time before and after. And this is a way also to avoid this pressure of the red button, because if we like, for me specifically, I really like to welcome people a little bit before the time, because I really like the conversation that may happen and the connection that may happen before starting. So it gives this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to create that spaciousness for people when we don't really have it in the platform itself. We have to choose how to use our tools to create spaciousness. So I saw somebody said they let people in early, or I have a colleague who said to me online today that she sets 2 start times, a gathering time and an actual starting time. And she publicizes both so people know when to come. So I'm going to give you kind of the psychological safety spin on this. And that is that I had a colleague say to me recently that in her team, which is an ongoing group of people, she doesn't feel safe or comfortable with that group of people. So in in-person life, she would intentionally slip into a meeting a few minutes late so that she didn't have to do the small talk at the beginning, and then she would slip out just a little bit early. And so that was a good reminder to me too, that people need to be sort of, I don't know if it's me giving them permission, they can do what they need to do, but people are adapting the online life to that, that idea of, I don't actually like the small talk at the beginning. I'm going to just slip in and maybe turn my video off or not join the meeting until a couple minutes in, so we can choose how that works. So that's one dynamic around punctuality. Another dynamic that I'm noticing is around physicality. And what I mean by that is, I think we've probably all had the experience of someone taking up more than their share of space in a room. Do you understand that expression, where they are kind of, they just occupy a lot of space physically, and they can use their presence, their physical body, to exert a particular influence, right? They can dominate that space, sometimes really positively, right? They might be really fun and energetic and amazing, but they also might be kind of dominating and intimidating. And one thing I love about Zoom is that everyone takes up the same amount of space. We each get our own little rectangle, right? And no one gets more and no one gets less. And that's reinforced by the fact that no one can interrupt one another on Zoom, for better or worse, right? So we're very polite. We know that only one person gets the floor at a time. And that creates a different kind of conversational dynamic, especially if you're used to a team or national culture of really dynamic, animated conversations where people are talking over top of each other and it's kind of loud and exciting and fun. Zoom isn't really like that. One person can talk at a time, and you all get the same amount of space. So it's a real challenge then to figure out also how to read people's body language if you can only see a little bit of them, right? I'm assuming some of you have found that, where you think, I'm making good eye contact with people, but I can't actually see how, if body language is a big part of communication, I'm missing some of my toolbox here. I can only see from their, chest up, and I don't have a good read on it. So that's another dynamic in Zoom that I think has implications for the way that we, that our physical bodies can create more safety for people, because it's kind of a great equalizer. Everybody gets their own rectangle. But as facilitators, we might be like, man, I'm really missing reading the body language of people, and also the physical energy and exchange of, I don't know what it is, pheromones or adrenaline or something that we get in a room. And I'm wondering if any of you have an example. Can someone share a story out loud of a way that you've seen people use physical space even in an online space? Is anybody seeing creative ways of people using the squares in creative ways with their bodies?
May I share one?
Please, yeah.
It was in the facilitation talks. We had met Martin Perel from the UK, and he didn't want to do an online session like an online session. He wanted people that were participating to feel like as if they were in the room with him. So he did the whole presentation standing up, using the walls, showing stuff from the walls, which I totally loved, and it was so energetic, and I loved the interaction behind it.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Raina. That's a great example. Does anyone else have an example of a way that someone used the physical space? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I have two that comes now into my mind. One, I did it last session. I asked people who is here for the first time to put their hands on the face, or if you, it was about the meeting of our IAF Romania, and to show how many meetings they have been on, to show 1, 2, and if it's the first time to put their hands on the face, like maybe they are shy or something. And another one, it's a facilitation technique called horseshoe, which I adapted online and also using physicality. What you basically do, you ask a question which has two parts. You would like people to be punctual, or do you want, I don't know, to get to your results? And depending on which side of the question, of the answer are you putting, to put yourself in the left side of your screen, in the middle if you are in between, or on the right side of your screen.
Love it. I'm going to use that one tomorrow.
You are a morning person, maybe a lunch person, or an evening person. When are you more productive?
Love it.
Yeah,
love it.
Good.
That's awesome. Anybody else have a good sort of physical example of using the space?
I was in one of the workshops of NVC and nonviolent communication, and the facilitator was asking us to use particular gestures which were common to everyone, that if you really like someone saying something, we all will do like this. Yeah, if you really feel that, that you're feeling very emotional, then you show the heart. And when, while practicing, when we all did it, that itself brought in a lot of energy. And then every time when someone would do this, it would bring in a good energy of the group. So I like that idea.
Nice. And we can also use, I love that, because you can use certain tools in Zoom that that allow people to participate without interrupting the flow of the meeting. So for example, if I were in a meeting and someone was having a sort of a side conversation with someone else, it might, as the facilitator, feel distracting or a little bit rude. Whereas in Zoom, you can just type it in the chat, or to use your example, you could show us that physical jazz hands or the heart, and we don't have to stop the flow, but we just get some affirmation. And it's kind of like getting a little round of applause. I saw somebody use that applause emoji. You know, you just have ways of getting people's physical affirmation that you're on the right track. And we need that feedback. And so that's one way that we, even as the facilitator, can feel safe in a space, is to go, how are we doing? You know, like, what's really going on here? And the physicality is one way that, well, if we feel like our toolbox has really been emptied, you know, that the main things that we use are not available to us, it's so helpful for us to hear other people talk about how this can be used. One fun way that we did it recently, I was taking an online improv class, and some of the scenes were great because people would, you know, they would literally physically fall, and they'd be like, you know, out of the room completely and claw their way back in. Or another guy was really great at kind of sitting way back when he didn't have much to say and then leaning in when he did. And so we can use the depth and size of the space really to help us with some of the dynamics in the room that I think are quite helpful in helping people feel that they belong and feel that they can contribute equally, and that the atmosphere is really positive, which I think is really terrific. So we're going to continue our conversation then about the dynamics in the room. We've talked about punctuality. We've talked about physicality. I want to talk about hostility, which I realize is a little bit strange, but I had someone post on LinkedIn recently that said they work in conflict resolution. And one of the ways that you help people work through conflict is by changing their environment, right? Just shaking things up a bit. And in our online spaces, it's actually not easy to do that. Or we've lost, even if it's not conflict, we've lost our ability to have varied venues. And sometimes the choice of venue is in fact a power-laden choice. If I can give you an example. If I'm doing a mediation between two groups and I were doing it in person, I would always choose a neutral space to host the meeting. I wouldn't have it at one of their offices or the other person's office. I would choose a neutral space. Similarly, on Zoom, I wouldn't normally, if I've never met you, I wouldn't normally come into your kitchen or your bedroom to have a meeting. And yet that's kind of what we're doing now. Or I might say, you know what, we need to take a break. Let's go and come back. But you end up coming back to the same kind of space. And I think all of us can feel a little bit down about the fact that we are kind of in the same space all the time. So one neat thing that someone I know tried recently was he encouraged people to use the virtual background on Zoom to create an atmosphere to make people feel like they were in a different place. So in his example, he wished he could meet his friends at a particular bar that they normally would meet to have a drink. And so he got a photo of that bar and put that as his virtual background, and encouraged anyone else coming to the meeting to use a virtual background of their favorite place to go out for a drink. So I want to kind of, you can hear even in the examples I'm giving that there's kind of a different level of seriousness, right? One is kind of a light, you know, let's pick a different venue. And the other is, wow, like we're really entrenched in some difficult conflict here, and doing that online for all the reasons we've been talking about, physicality, but also we can't just leave, or we absolutely can't interrupt each other, which is good and sometimes maybe not good, a little limiting, is quite different in this space. So what I'd like to do, if one of you is able to set up another breakout room, I'd suggest the same ones as before so that we don't have to do introductions again. And we really only need maybe 3 or 4 minutes. If people could chat about what else you're noticing around dynamics. I've talked about punctuality. I've talked about physicality. I've talked about hostility. We're going to do one more. Maybe you can explore in your groups very concrete ways that you are using what Zoom is good at to pay attention to nuance in the room. and make people feel safer in that space. So if we can have 3 or 4 minutes on that, and then we will come back and talk about other specific functions to wrap things up today, I'd appreciate that. Thanks so much. Hi, Steve. That I am back where I was when we started the call. So while you were away, I was away too, running across the street. So this is my new example of nimble facilitation. So it's been a very exciting day for me. I was getting texts from my family saying, you can come back. So back I am. So I hope that you got a few little tidbits of insight from other people in your group as we've been talking about the promises, the dynamics, and the features. So I just want to I'm going to tell you how it is that I'm showing you what I'm showing you here in a moment, but we've talked about the physicality of the space, the punctuality, good and bad, that comes from having that little red button. We've talked about some hostility issues, or how to manage big emotions, or the need for just a change of scenery. So the last one I wanted to mention has to do with anonymity. And again, I'm back on my hate crime program that I was working on the other day. Because we had a decision to make as a facilitation team as to whether we were going to give people the option online to be anonymous or not. So if you are engaged in in-person consultations of some kind, you might be invited to show up to a physical meeting, and you decide if you're going to show up or not. Or you might be invited to do a survey online, which you know is an anonymous survey. So usually you have this clear sense of whether your face, your identity, your full person is going to be identifiable or not identifiable in a space. In Zoom, we have that option. And so I want to talk through a little bit how to think about it even, because we decided in this particular meeting that we would invite people to contribute anonymously if they wanted to. So how that happened was 2 ways. One is on Zoom, you obviously can turn your video off. So if you don't want people to see your face, you can turn your video off. What you also might want to do for just maybe for your own, sorry, let me explain this step better. In Zoom, you have an option to hide the names of non-video participants. So for example, if all of you, can you just do this for me for a sec as an experiment? Turn your video off for a second, and then, yeah, just turn your video off. Okay, now you can turn your video back on. Just turn it right back on. When you turn it off, can I see by show of hands, how many of you could see people's names written on the screen when they left? Could you see their names? Only some of you, yeah, some of you, yeah. That is a setting on your machine that you can change. So this is also very useful for other kinds of facilitation exercises like a fishbowl or something like that. If you don't want to see the names of the people who've turned off their videos, you can do that. So I'm going to tell you how. There's a stop where you turn off your video, there's a little arrow up. If you click on there and go to video settings, in your settings, you can find a little one that says hide non-video participants. And what that means is that when people don't have their video on, you can't see their name. You could see it on their participant list, but not on the name, not on the screen. Let's address their actual name on the participant list though. That's the other thing. I can, in my screen, if I wanted to, we talked earlier today about renaming yourself. Imagine, for those of you that can actually see my video right now, imagine if my name, instead of saying Rebacca Sutherns, it just had 3 dots. So when I now go to put something in the chat, you don't know who, if everybody did that, you wouldn't know who put something in the chat. As a facilitator, that's actually a very useful tool, because you might have an exercise where you actually want the input to be random or anonymous or unidentifiable, at least to the person who gave it. So you can invite people to change their name and make themselves anonymous and use the chat.
The one disadvantage of that, though, as happened to me in this meeting I was mentioning, is that somebody was getting very angry about what comments someone was making in the chat, and they were making them anonymously, and that person said, hey, wait a minute, if we were in a room together, you would have to own that comment. You would be there physically, we would talk face to face, you wouldn't be able to hide and make that comment, and so please don't make yourself anonymous in this space if you're going to be making some really strong assertions like that. So it led to some people appreciated the increased safety from anonymity, and other people said, wait a minute, I don't like it. You should show up and take ownership visibly of your comments. So I'm wondering if anyone in the room has an experience of that or something else you want to say or ask when it comes to anonymity before we move on. Any other comments on it?
Yeah, may I say, there are times when we ask people questions to be answered, and they may not feel comfortable to share with others. They can send to the facilitator, and facilitator can reflect them maybe on another platform, maybe on whiteboard or Jamboard or any other tools.
Absolutely. So you're building in ways to help people be able to participate as openly or as anonymously as you want. And sometimes we can do it in very subtle ways, like with the whiteboard. People's settings can show who drew what on the whiteboard. You can put your name on your cursor, or you can turn that off. So there's different ways that you can change your settings to give people full identifiability or not. And I would love for you in your facilitation practice to be thinking about that. There's no one right answer, but it's about saying, is it important that we know who said what? And who is that important to? And would the whole group agree? All that kind of stuff is really critical. If it's okay with you, I'm going to take us to our third point, because I think it's going to take us back into this same space. But first, I want to answer a question that you asked. And that is a technical question about how I'm splitting my screen between my iPad and my face. Given my day, it's amazing to me that it actually worked, because sometimes it doesn't, but at least this part worked today. I use a software package called eCam Live. I will type the name of it in here. And it is allowing me to do a couple of different things lately that I'm finding quite useful. And this is something else I wanted to tell you about in today's session. And that is, as the world goes digital, if you are making your living as a facilitator, you may want to be thinking about ways to up your game, because just the fact that you know how to use Zoom might not be enough of a competitive advantage anymore. So one of the ways that I'm trying to up my game is to get some tech in place when it works, to make sure that my video quality is good, that my audio quality is good, and that in fact you can replicate some of the things that I would do in a room. So let me show you what I mean. What I'm using, you can look at if you can see me online, I simply have my iPad and my Apple Pencil, and they are plugged into my laptop. If you don't have that eCam Live software or something like it, you can still share your screen and have people see your slides just like you would a flip chart. So you can see that I'm drawing on this in blue to say hello, and it works as a virtual flip chart. It is not collaborative in the sense that other people can't draw on it, but you could annotate on it, which is interesting. So you could use the annotate feature on Zoom to have people draw things on my iPad, but it doesn't capture it digitally. So if I saved my iPad screen in that moment, it wouldn't capture your drawings, but visually to you, it would look like we were working in a collaborative space. I don't tend to use my iPad quite like that, but the way I got the split screen was doing it this way. The other thing I use it for is you can actually put your face live on your slides. So if I had PowerPoint slides today, which I don't, but I could project it the same way that I've projected my iPad, and you can see my face and my slide, because that's one of the things I don't love about Zoom in its regular form, is that when you put your slides up, your face disappears, right? So this way you can capture my energy and still see some content. So that's why I like it. All right, last thing. Last three things. I want to talk about some other specific features, I guess, functions, could have been that F, of Zoom that allow us to build or undermine safety. So we'll go through them in this order. I mentioned already that you can hide the names of video participants and that you can stop your video. You can also use the video in other ways to draw people out and focus on them in a way that might be great for your process, but it also might be awkward. So be careful as the facilitator how you're calling people out. So my friend Andrew is on this call. So Andrew, I'm going to call you out in a sec, okay? So what I'm going to do is if I give Andrew that warning, hey, Andrew, I'm going to call you out in a second, and then I'm clicking on the 3 dots on Andrew's screen. Now, this is interesting. When I do that, it is not letting me do what I was just going to show. That's interesting. So let me find another way. That is very interesting. Let me tell you what just happened for learning purposes. Normally, when I'm running a meeting and I click on the 3 dots to the top right corner of somebody's rectangle, one of the choices that I have there says, sorry, let me go back to this and see if I can find it another way. One of the choices I have there says to rename. That was one of the ones we already used. And another one is to use the spotlight video. Right now, when I'm clicking on the 3 dots on Andrew's screen, it is not letting me use spotlight video. It may be because I'm no longer a host. Maybe that's why.
Would you like me to do it? Can you?
Yeah,
can we try it? Yeah,
I can. Andrew, for me, Celeste, it's because I'm not the co-host anymore. So if Celeste were the host, she can see how Andrew just got big on your screen. So if you wanted to call someone out and say, hey, Andrew, what do you think about this? And then Andrew could participate. Then when he was done, Celeste or Andrew could minimize his video right back into gallery view, if you don't mind. So if you want to minimize that, thanks, Andrew. So you as the facilitator, as the co-host or host, you have some power over how you use that. But imagine how awkward that could be for someone who didn't feel safe in the space of being called out like that. That could be very awkward. So maybe low stakes, but at least it shows how video can be used in a helpful way or an unhelpful way. Another thing is about safety around your own, so not really safety so much as comfort, I guess. If you spend a lot of time being distracted by your own face in video, you're looking at yourself all the time, you can hide self-view, which is actually kind of a helpful feature. So again, if you go up to those 3 dots as the host or co-host, you can see an option there that's called hide self-view. So I'm going to do it right now. When I do it right now, I can still see all of you. I'm hoping you can still see me, but I can't see myself anymore. So you can each try that if you want to. Click on your 3 dots, find hide self-view. And so if you find that you're part of Zoom fatigue is that we are self-monitoring all the time. We're like checking our hair, making sure we're looking in the right place. We don't even know we're doing it. So if you find that you're distracted by your own self-view, just turn it off and just begin to get comfortable both with seeing yourself and not seeing yourself on camera. So I just want to acknowledge that between hiding your own video, hiding other people's video, spotlighting video, there's ways that we can use the camera itself to create or undermine full participation in a room. One other thing, just a small tip. I hope that each of you have a very clear understanding of where your camera is. So the way I want you to know where your camera is, grab a piece of paper or a Post-it note or your thumb, something, cover up your camera. Can you cover it? Physically cover it up. Okay, this is your new little Energizer icebreaker game. Uncover your camera if you have a pet in your house. Do you have a pet? If you have a pet, open your camera. Oh, look, these are people that I know have something in common with me because I have a pet. Cover your camera again. Hey, Gerard, can you give us something? Say something that's true for you that you want to know if it's true for anybody else. Are you able to do that, Gerard? Say, uncover your camera if.
Okay, so uncover your camera if you are a dancer.
I like dancing. All right, so take your thing off your camera. Thanks for being a good sport, Gerard. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because as a facilitator, eye contact is really important to us, and we need to know that we're connecting with eye contact through with people in the room. On Zoom, that is both amazing and not amazing. Why? Because if you were talking to someone in real life and they took up this much space in your field of view, you would literally have to be like right in their face, right? You'd be so close together, you'd be talking to each other oddly closely. We've become used to that in Zoom, and it's kind of nice. And so I was in a meeting recently that would have happened in person, would have been like a cocktail party. You would have mingled around, maybe talked to people you knew, maybe talked to only the people you were sitting with. But in Zoom, it's like a big circle and you can talk to everyone. And at the end of the meeting, people said, oh, I really like that because I connected with everyone in the room. Other people who would prefer to sit at the back of a room can't hide in Zoom, right? You can't really, you got the people that like sitting at the front and the people that like sitting at the back. You can't do that in Zoom. And I think we should be, as facilitators, really conscious of the fact that people are being asked to all participate equally, and in face-to-face life, they wouldn't. Like, we've got options about how we participate, and probably the facilitator in us kind of loves this, where it's like, I want everybody, fully in. Not everybody wants that. And so what does it mean for us to use our space and give people options not to be fully in all the time? So yeah, pay attention to how you use eye contact and how you use video. And also, this whole call, when I have been in my right space, I am looking at my camera. What I wish I could be doing is looking at you. If I'm looking at you, because this is my screen that you are on right now, you feel like I'm looking over your shoulder and you're like, why are you not looking at me, right? Does it look weird for me? You feel like I'm talking to someone else over here. We need to practice looking at our camera and get used to not having the immediate eye contact feedback of people in the room all the time. Because even if I were working on my laptop instead of on my screens, my camera is above your heads. So if I were looking at you, you'd be looking at the top of my head. Has anybody been in a meeting where they've seen somebody that talks like this the whole time and you don't know why? It's because they're looking at faces, not at the camera. Yeah? It's weird to have a conversation with someone when they're not looking at you. Okay? I'm seeing some of you laughing. Give me thumbs up if you like this point. It's a helpful point, yeah? So here's what I did. Let me see just a second. It'll come into focus in a minute. This is my little hack. This is my Post-it note from early in the pandemic. I stuck this on my laptop right beside my camera to remind me to put my eyes at my camera. Now I don't need it because I'm used to it. Okay, there's your little hack for today on that. All right. We are so close to done our time and so close to done our ideas. So I'm almost ready to give you the last couple things here. Let me get this back on. Sorry, this has gone to sleep on me. All right, let's talk chat for a second. As the host, you can decide how the chat is used. Either no chat at all, they can only chat with you, or they can chat with everyone, or they can chat with everyone and one-to-one, right? And it matters because you might find those side conversations really distracting and you want to manage people's attention to focus their energy only in one space, in which case you might want to turn off the chat. But I've also had people really offended by that and say, don't take that away from us. We love the chat and you don't get to silence us in that way. Okay? Or the chat, if it is active and going, can take off in a really different direction than the main Zoom space. And then you're in big trouble as the facilitator if you don't have somebody managing the chat really skillfully. And I had that happen in a program recently. I did have a producer with me who was monitoring the chat. She couldn't keep up quickly enough with the content as it was being generated. And even when she could, there were judgment calls to be made about what to do about what was happening in the chat because it was getting a bit nasty. And people felt like we didn't honor our ground rules, which was respectful interactions, because they felt that the chat got disrespectful, even though what was happening in the live room was respectful, in my opinion. So they felt like I didn't honor what I had said I would do because the chat took on a life of its own separately. Does that make sense? So be really careful about using the chat quite intentionally. I'm curious if anyone has a little anecdote or tip or any story about a chat incident that either good or bad about how you've loved the chat or not loved the chat or used it as a tool in your meetings. Anybody have anything on that? You can just speak it out or type it.
I think that's Anna Marin, yeah?
Hi, I'm from Romania. Last week I had a training where I was using Prezi video. I was using a flip chart, and I was using the chat to interact with people. And at the end, one of the participants, even if I answered him on 3 questions, he said that I didn't took the 4th one, which was the most important for him. And he said that next time, be really careful with the chat because people are pointing important things for them there. So yeah, that was funny. Not, but still.
Well, and imagine that in an in-person space, because often we're familiar with that a little more, right? If the whole room puts their hand up to ask a question and we only have time to answer 3 questions, there will be people whose questions are not answered. In the chat, people expect all of their questions to be answered. So you may need to set expectations about what you reasonably can and can't do, or you have someone else who is doing that answering for you, and not all of them will be answered out loud, but they will be answered in the chat. Another thing I've run into is that, and somebody may be able to give me some clarity here, I've heard different things about what gets captured in the chat transcript. So you may not realize you can save the chat. And when you save the chat, the private conversations that have gone on between people, you need to know if those are going to be captured or not. So my understanding, and I want to put a caveat on this because I've heard very different things, and it's something I can't practice as the host. Somebody once said to me, don't put anything private in the chat because it will show up in the transcript later. Someone else said, no, that's not true. If it's a private conversation between 2 people, it shows up in their transcript, but not in everybody's transcript. And someone else said, that is true, but what also shows up in the transcript for the host would be the chats from the breakout rooms. And people in breakout rooms think they are private. So you need to be very clear with people what does and doesn't show up in chat transcripts. That's part of maintaining a respectful and safe space for them. And I'm still learning in that area because I keep hearing new information about it, and I need to test that out better than I have. So chat is one area where I want you to be thinking. Another area is breakout rooms when that comes to not only the chat, as I just mentioned, but also the fact that breakout rooms in Zoom are quite private. As facilitators, we might not like it because we can't lurk. We can't listen in, see if they need more time. Do they understand the instructions, right? You can, but it's a bit either creepy or really obvious. But imagine if you were in a meeting with people who aren't getting along at all. They know each other and they don't have a lot of time for each other. And you put them in a breakout room randomly of 2. That breakout room is private, and now you're stuck in this breakout room with someone that you're really, really struggling with. And it's a very private space and you don't have anyone else there, and it could be quite unsafe or at least uncomfortable for people. One tip I have for you in that is to create breakout rooms of at least 3 every time. The other thing that that's good for is if one person leaves to go grab a coffee, the other person isn't alone. So I like breakout rooms of 3 when I can't see them. In a room physically, I wouldn't mind pairs at all. I use pairs all the time. I don't use pairs that much on Zoom for those 2 reasons. 2 last things, and then I want to honor our time and make sure we finish on time today. One is what I'm calling the minimum viable platform. One of the reasons that we don't feel as psychologically relaxed in a space as we normally would want to is simply because we are living through a global pandemic. And Black Lives Matter and murder hornets and, you know, summer vacation with our kids and whatever, I don't know. There's stress, right? People's stress level is high. If we as facilitators want to use the most amazing techniques and tools and platforms that we could possibly find to run the most amazing meeting ever, and we lose our participants in the midst of it because they're like, please don't make me learn one more thing. Don't make me click 5 other ways. I don't want to be taken to Mural or Miro or Lino or Mentimeter. I don't. I've figured out Zoom. It's all I got. Stay with it. Yes? Or can we please just have a meeting by phone? I want to go for a walk. So I do walk and talks all the time with people now. If it's a one-on-one meeting, let's phone each other and we'll each go for a walk, get some fresh air, get off of our screen. So one of the ways we can create mental space and a little more cognitive space for people is not asking them to do and learn so much at once when we're already being asked to adapt and pivot and respond all the time. Has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with the fact that your amazing Mentimeter word cloud would look so beautiful. I'm sure it would. But if your audience can't do it, don't do it. I had a meeting 2 weeks ago. There were 6 people. I had set up this thing in Mural for us to do a Post-it note thing on the whiteboard in Mural. 5 of them got there and were busily doing the task. The most senior guy in the room, if you can see my video, you can look at it now, he did one of these. He backed away from the camera, he crossed his arms, he started swearing, and he refused to participate. Awesome. I had 3 other ways he could participate. You know, do you want to text me? Do you want to use the chat? Do you want me to use my screen share? No, he wouldn't have any of it. And in fact, me giving him more choices made it worse because it was just more cognitive load, right? Too much. So be very careful about how many things you're adding because people are already watching, listening, clicking, reading, typing. It's a lot. So I would encourage you just to sort of figure out the minimum viable platform, the minimum viable functionality that you need and rock it. You know, do it so well that you don't need to impress people with your fabulous, you know, now we're on Mentimeter, now we're on Mural, now I'm doing this other thing. Nobody cares. Get the job done and keep people relaxed in it. And so if they're going to be stressed by your brilliance, it's not brilliance anymore. So that, and then my final point would be, don't be oblivious to who you are in the space. As facilitators, we value neutrality, don't we? And we say, well, you know, in theory, a facilitator could facilitate on anything. Like, we don't need to know the content. We're about process. Bring me into any room and I could figure it out. Yes, and who you are matters. It's not, you're not a cardboard cutout of someone else who could do the same thing. So if I'm coming in to facilitate something on privilege, on white privilege, for example, I'm a white privileged woman. Can I even be in that space doing that? You know, could I do a session on masculinity? Probably not. Who I am matters. I'm Canadian, I'm educated, I'm English speaking as a first language, I'm white, I'm this and that. Please don't be the oblivious facilitator in the space that just pretends that holding the space can be done by anyone. In that moment, it's being done by you. So I would just really encourage you as we navigate these days of increased awareness around diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, reconciliation, that we not contribute to the problem by being oblivious to who we are in the space. And I think it's another way we can build safety. So I hope that this has been practical and helpful for you. I would be really happy to hang around for 10 or 15 minutes and continue the conversation if you want to have a chat with fewer people. I'm not going to be the draconian red button person. You can do that yourself. But I do want to honor your time. So we said we'd wrap it up now, so I will pass it back over to our hosts.
Well, thank you very much, Rebacca. It was really wonderful to have you sharing your stories and your experiences. And I'm sure that every one of us was quite inspired by that. And let me tell you that I'm happy to learn from you that it's good to have good neighborhood relationships, just in case. That's wonderful for me. It was a lesson learned, I can tell you. Well, when I finish this call, I'm going to knock at doors, yeah, just to be sure that they know me, and yeah. So guys, if Rebacca is willing to stay a little bit more, if you wish to stay and ask questions and share your experiences, you're allowed to. Just let me tell you that we'll be having another session like this. We'll be together in our lounge on the 3rd of September, and we'll let you know who are our hosts and invitees for this. And I really appreciate that you participated, and I look forward to see you soon. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, everyone.